But you get to hear insights from Jonathan Levin, the newly minted CEO of Chainalysis, the premier blockchain data platform involved in investigating some of the most noteworthy crimes in the financial blockchain-related world.
Yeah.
So, first of all, well, congratulations on becoming CEO. But you're a co-founder, so maybe you could tell us a bit about the origin story, how you got into the space and launching Chainalysis.
Yeah. Well, it's great to be here. I love the phrase "minting a CEO." Like that's going to be my new way of saying that. Yeah, I'm a freshly minted CEO. I've been in crypto for a long time. I fell into crypto in 2012, writing really like the earliest economic analysis of how Bitcoin is actually secured, and writing the original sort of game theory work about how decentralized networks would actually function at scale. And so through that research process, I realized that there needed to be a company that knows the most about how and why people actually use cryptocurrencies, and met Michael and Jan, my two co-founders at Chainalysis, to help them really develop the business side of who needed to know what was happening on chain. And we were building this map of really which entities were transacting on the blockchain, but we had to figure out, well, who actually wanted to understand that in 2014. And in 2014, the people who really wanted to understand that were government agencies that were investigating criminal activity in crypto, and some of the early cryptocurrency exchanges that really needed to understand their customers. And so in 2014, Chainalysis is born. We have two sides of the business, sort of the public sector side, where we serve regulators and law enforcement with technology so that they can ensure the market integrity. And then also the private sector side, and we work with everyone from, DeFi founders to the largest banks in the world who are custodying crypto assets and helping them really manage their risk. And so, 10 years in, when the opportunity arose to become the CEO, I was already running R&D at Chainalysis. I've been running all of our field operations at Chainalysis. And so, when Michael stepped away, I said, well, I'd love to take the job and make sure that we can harness, all the tailwinds in the market to make a great company.
Fast forward to 2025, and we have a new U.S. president. We have two major wars going on in Ukraine and in the Middle East. And we have cryptocurrencies being used. And in that context, with these geopolitical tensions, how are you seeing at Chainalysis cryptocurrencies being used within that context?
We are seeing cryptocurrencies being used in those contexts. And I'll tell you that a lot of our government agency clients have built capabilities over the last 10 years to really understand the role of cryptocurrency in current geopolitics, and whether that is Iranian use of cryptocurrencies to pay for intelligence or even hits on individuals, or whether that is ransomware campaigns that have the backing of are coming from Russia, or whether those are DPRK hacks coming and stealing $1.5 billion worth of cryptocurrency last year. There is significant impact of cryptocurrencies on the world geopolitical stage. And what we are seeing is that governments are actually investing in capabilities to understand really the macro level threats that are posed in the world and how cryptocurrency impacts that. And just to give you some specific examples, is that you've seen, in the Ukraine context, you've seen cryptocurrency being used by Wagner to pay for mercenaries, and really being able to have the tools at your disposal to be able to go after that has been critical in helping disrupt some of that activity. And then, Hamas and Hezbollah also had cryptocurrency that was seized in operations that helped prevent cryptocurrency being used for terrorist activity. And so really governments around the world are building capabilities and partnering with the private industry to have real impact on geopolitics.
And so is it being used by the underdogs, I would say, and are the status quo governments unhappy about that? And so is that the dynamic?
I think that when you think about cryptocurrency, I think about it as a universal technology. Like I think about it very similar to the internet, where you have the ability to use cryptocurrency for all the legitimate purposes, and all the promises that we preach as an industry is that everyone in the world should be able to access these things. But at the same time, we live in a world where security is paramount, and we rely on our governments to protect our national security and public safety. I mean, everyone here has walked through tons of security checkpoints in and out of this building. I mean, we live in a world where the threat is real, and governments need to be able to operate in a new environment. And frankly, cryptocurrency has become mainstream, and governments have to respond to that. And so I think we are seeing that governments are using it as a tool to be able to understand their adversaries. And increasingly, I think in the next year, you'll actually see governments use it for payments in a more sort of traditional sense.
CoinDesk did a report on the DPRK in North Korea and found that they were employing factories of people to perpetrate crypto scams. Is that the most egregious use by government in trying to create or implement fraud and crime? Or
I think that one thing that people don't understand when it comes to scammers, for example, is that people receive these text messages on their phones being like, "Hey John, how are you?" Or "Hey Sandy, we haven't caught up in a while." And that seems to be like fairly naive, or seems to be fairly victimless, at least if you don't respond to them. And the reality is that these are large-scale operations, either on an organized crime basis, or even, as you say, like associated with nation states, where the level of scam activity is actually increased dramatically. And if you think about a lot of governments around the world are now thinking about scams as a national threat. And one of the things that we noticed at Chainalysis is that our major customers from around the world wanted to understand scams a lot better. And we just acquired a company called Alteria that is actually collecting information about scammers at scale to help actually step into fraud prevention rather than just compliance. And so, we are very much focused on solving every element of that scammer infrastructure, whether that's the money laundering side or even courting victims in the first place and trying to prevent that harm from happening.
You also acquired Hexagate, correct? Yes. Tell me a bit about that acquisition and the aim there.
Yeah, I think in general, if you think about sort of cryptocurrency in 2025, we're seeing sort of mass adoption of crypto assets. We're seeing lots of excitement. There's lots of FOMO happening, and really that's where there can be real fund loss for the everyday consumer. And one of the things that I wanted to do for a long time is move Chainalysis from being the best at sort of investigating crimes after the fact into prevention. And prevention for us means how do we minimize the amount of fund loss that happens either through hacks, protocol compromises, governance attacks, flash bots, like literally anything that can happen on chain, and scams. Those are like the two areas that we hear the most about from our clients. And so we bought Hexagate, which is an observability and threat intelligence platform for smart contracts and protocols that is working with all the leading teams around the world to help them understand when their protocol is under attack or when a wallet you've got assets that are deployed in a protocol that's under attack. And so really helping people understand really the on-chain threats that lead to fund loss. And Hexagate has been working with 80 of the best teams around the world to do that. Great team based in Tel Aviv, and Altaria is the company that's doing the scam detection work, also based in Tel Aviv.
So as a regular, everyday person, consumer, if you will, how do you avoid being scammed?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And obviously, we are trying to help all of the service providers that you're using help guide users to prevent them from getting scammed. So if you're using either a centralized or a self-hosted wallet, our goal is to embed our data into those places so that they know when they're acting with a scam account. So that helps you protect downstream. But if you move upstream to the individual user, it's really about vetting exactly what you're doing online. The best thing you can do is take your time. Like anything to do with time crunches and pressure is something that you will make mistakes, you will make judgment mistakes, and it happens literally to the best people in the world. And so my number one piece of advice to people is that, when it comes to financial services, like nothing is urgent. Don't act very quickly. You can't click on links from emails that even look legitimate. And really, when it comes to interacting with scammers and stuff, like the best thing is to ignore all of those things rather than even let them in like one piece. So I think that those are some of the things. And then there's a lot of cybersecurity best practices, like use a password manager, don't reuse passwords between different things, don't use two-factor SMS. Like there's a lot of best practices that you should look at online and take your time in setting up all of your crypto accounts.
So how does the transparency of the blockchain data make it, I suppose, easier to catch bad actors? And does mixing services complicate that, or privacy coins?
Yeah, I think that one thing that you'll see is that when it comes to criminal activity, the blockchain has been shown to be an excellent tool in sort of catching criminals that actually are abusing cryptocurrencies. And when you ask one of our law enforcement customers about whether they would rather a criminal use cash or whether they would rather them use crypto, all of them will tell you we would much rather our subject use crypto rather than cash. And so the thing about sort of privacy coins and mixing services is that those can be difficult for law enforcement to track on like a one-time basis. But when you look at sort of the larger criminal network and you look at like the way in which they're using the variety of crypto infrastructure out there, there's always a gap. And so no one will be using crypto completely anonymously forever at scale. And so there are these gaps to be able to identify them and unravel the network from there.
You mentioned Iran. What is Iran using cryptocurrencies for?
Iran has very typical sort of adoption cycles to what you would think Iran has. There's a large sort of ecosystem in Iran which is for the everyday consumer. There are a lot of exchanges in Iran. There is a lot of wallet infrastructure that's targeted at Iranian nationals, and people in those countries tend to want to hold crypto assets as a hedge against the government, or as something that is independent from the regime, or they want to send money across borders. And so there is definitely a part of the Iranian crypto economy that is legitimate consumers using it for those purposes. But we have also seen evidence that IRGC is using that to pay for counterintelligence and other operations that they run. And so, there is actually government use of cryptocurrency to avoid sanctions and actually use it in ways that we are not going to appreciate as people that sit on the other side of that.
Circumvent the dollar, the system.
Circumvent the dollar, but also just pay for assets using crypto, which is a threat of national security and something that needs to be dealt with.
How does artificial intelligence enter the equation? And we're going to see financial services go into hyperdrive. Is this going to be used as a tool for bad actors? How are you observing the innovation in that sense?
I mean, we are really seeing AI sort of impact kind of everything, and it wouldn't be a Davos panel without mentioning AI, and so I'm glad that we can touch on it. I think that we're seeing adoption of AI from illicit actors. We're seeing it in the scam space specifically, where scammers are using AI to generate very believable messages based on inputs and variables that they're gathering about people. Makes things really tough for individuals to have defenses against it. But I think, from Chainalysis' point of view, we are also thinking about AI from our own purposes, and whether that is like the business processes that we run, the intelligence that we collect from the blockchain, or also embedding AI in our products to make people's lives a lot easier on building investigations. These are all areas that we're actively exploring.
So when you're seeing all this criminal activity and blockchain data and such, what scares you? What keeps you up at night?
Yeah, I think that one thing that probably scares me the most is when we have seen sort of examples of criminal syndicates that are operating in jurisdictions that are hard to access. And one of the things that I think is important is that we can continue to make progress on investigations and work with private sector around the world to have the impact on those cases. And one of the things that scares me is that a big crypto economy in Russia that is isolated from everything else is a scary proposition. But the reality is that even if that is the case, we have some good tools at our disposal to go and track down those currencies and help private industry actually help with disruption, not just the government.
Okay. Well, we've run out of time, but one more question to just leave on a better note, but your optimistic prediction for 2025?
Optimistic prediction for 2025 is that essentially we have lots of new enterprises entering the crypto space for the first time. We'll see banks custody crypto assets in a meaningful way in the US this year. We'll see governments use stablecoins for payments that will happen both in the US and globally, and that we will see really the innovation of the promises of more smart contract type applications enter the zeitgeist in traditional finance. And maybe my final prediction will be that there will be some synergy between AI agents that are paying for different things with crypto assets by the end of the year. And I think that that will help realize the promise of both crypto and AI agents.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jonathan.
Thanks so much.